What would you do if you were told you only had one day, 1 week, or 1 year to live? Because we're talking movies, we're talking 1 week, starring Joshua Jackson, Leanne Baldwin, and Gord Downey. Written and directed by Michael McGowan. Many of life's failures are people who do not realize how close they were to success when they gave up.
I'll tell you, it's a blank from diapers to Depends. Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of How'd You Like That Movie? As we said last week on our show about Twister, we're going to be doing some CanCon, or can, as Scott likes to say. So we are doing the Canadian film 1 week from 2008. It's shot in Canada. It's got a Canadian director, and it's got a Canadian cast. It is very Canadiana. So Scott, why don't you take us away?
Yeah, with this month's theming of the Canada, to me, this movie is pretty much the embodiment of Canada. Like, if space aliens were to come, and each country had to present something that embodies what they are, I think this might be a top choice. Independence Day would probably be America's, but I think this one would be a top choice for Canada.
Yeah, this and Strange Brew, which, if you're an older generation of Canadian, you definitely would be picking Strange.
Why are you so old?
But I 100% agree with you. Like, watching this film, I'm like, oh my God, this is almost like so Canadian it hurts. Like, I can feel the poutine and maple syrup right now. I'm surprised a Mountie didn't show up at some point. And that Mountie was Paul Gross. You know what I mean? Hey, sorry, yeah. Are you looking for how to find your way west? You know what I mean? Like,
hey there.
How you doing?
Good. You boys here for business or pleasure?
Everything from like the landscapes, the soundtrack, the people, and we'll talk about the cameos, the film stock, like it has that very like CBC, we don't have a lot of money for our production budget. I mean, this was a $2 million budget, which I do wonder how much of that was telefilm like tax credits. So like, as far as like cash in hand, like a good part of this, like 1 million of that 2 million might have actually just been given directly back to them by the Canadian and on the Canadian government in tax credits. So like, this was 100% a good choice for kicking off our first like Canadian film of our Canada A show.
Yeah, I'm glad I picked it.
I mean, as a film, it definitely is lacking. But
I get, like, watching the movie, I was thinking, I'm like, oh, I can see where Chris is going to cut this fucking shit up. But I think back in 2008 too, right? Like thinking now, like thinking 2023, like if they were to remake this movie, this guy is a fucking YouTube vlogger now, because there's so many fucking people that just make a living off this like crisis of fate, like just crisis he was going through, that he just had to get away, that he decided he, was gonna go west and just literally stop at the world's biggest tourist stops along the way.
Well, at least Canada's biggest tourist stops. Yes, it has a very eat, pray, love kind of vibe to it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in terms of like character, I would say depictions, this is 100% Canadian too. Like, I don't know any other fucking guy who cheats on his fiance, tells her pretty much the same morning after he's done, and she doesn't get mad at him, and they end up still sleeping together later on. And
it's because he's got cancer. He's got cancer. When you have cancer, you can like get away with anything. Some interesting points in this film though, like, so this film's from 2008, and I remember watching it, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, man, this has a very like 500 Days of Summer vibe, with the like voiceover narrative, and it's kind of the like not necessarily linear shot choice and stuff like that. And so I thought they were like ripping off 500 Days of Summer. 500 Days of Summer actually comes out in 2009. So it's like it's weird because they're so similar, even in like the monotone, like, and you know, then he did this and then he did that, or how his like the C story is basically his interaction with people on the road, and then every once in a while they'd be like, and then Julie found the love of her life, and I'm like, did 500 Days of Summer rip them off? Like, I was like, I mean, as you know, I am not a big fan of voiceover narration as exposition, unless, I mean, I think Stand By Me for some reason does it well, maybe because they don't get too carried away with it, and because it does come from the novel. But I'd have to actually go back and watch Stand By Me now as a grown-up, and maybe I don't like it then. But like, this film actually could have been much better. I mean, I do love the idea of like a road film shot on a motorcycle. Oh yeah, go ahead. You got to say some stuff. So,
well, like back in terms that I think that is also very fucking Canadian, because to me the one thing that reminded me of like your depictions of the sea story was fucking Robertson Davies' Fifth Business, right? Where you're not the main protagonist, you're like the whole meaning where, you know, he thought the main character thought he wasn't the main person and he was just a side person that, you know, brings along, and, you know, based off of his small interactions with people, you know, changes their lives. And that's pretty much what, you know, this character did with Joshua Jackson. Because yeah, like everything, like even the one with the picture of
the German tourists.
were they German?
Well, they were speaking with like German language,
I didn't,
or they
yeah,
could
I
have
didn't
been.
know.
They could have
Yeah,
been Schweiz, like they could have been Austrian, or what. They were
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
speaking a dialect of German, right? So
Right. And then it's, you know, you know, they were the love of their lives, but, you know, they fought. Every time they fought, they would look at his picture, right? And that's what brought, like, it's those little interaction things that I actually
he
enjoyed
was
the
like,
most.
"I love Tofito," and she was like, "That Canadian was so hot, it makes me wet in my vagina right now."
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? Like,
So let's
even
make the sex and stay together.
Bring on the Flugelheimkeimler!
yeah, when he was in, it was Alberta, right? No, was it Alberta? Where was the
where he like finds the woman's dog.
no, not the dog, the horse. Oh yeah, like the
Yeah, that's
dead
Alberta.
dog.
Yep. Yeah,
That
because
was
she
Alberta.
goes up to Fort McMurray to see her son. Like
I
again,
thought
there's
she
all
was
this
with
like
no,
little.
I thought she was Manitoba, and then because the
Well, Fort
son went
McMurray's in
to.
Alberta. I would assume that she was in Alberta. I mean, let's be honest. From Saskatchewan to the BC border, it's basically the same shit. And that is going to sound like a super Ontario-centric attitude. I was born in Alberta. I can say that shit. Really, basically, once you leave Ontario until you get to BC, the prairies are basically the same thing, except Alberta has the Rockies. So,
uh, but yeah, and then you have, you know, the same narration where, you know, he's like, oh, he's never ridden a horse, and he really hoped that the grandma
that she could ride him.
Yeah.
Nice.
That, listen, I don't have a problem. I wish those sea stories were done better, because I do like them. I like that interaction, but I am not a big fan of using voiceover. To me, it's lazy exposition. So you could have dialogue where the characters, especially, it's a perfect setup, right? Because as I've talked about in other shows, especially like most recently with our Mission Impossible show, how if you have characters that have known each other, Scott, it's like being like saying like, you know, Scott, I know how much you and I enjoy soccer or something. It's like, yeah, these guys have known, they met playing soccer. Obviously, they know that. You wouldn't be verbalizing this. Because you have all these strangers, it actually allows you to use dialogue to tell your story, right? When Gordon Downey from the Tragically Hip, the late lead singer of the Tragically Hip, which, okay, I just want to sidebar on that. So what I found really interesting is I thought that maybe Gord already had his, because he ended up dying from brain cancer. And I thought that he already had cancer at this time when they shot this film. He didn't get his diagnosis till 2015. So that's a bit creepy and eerie. Like, he plays like a cancer survivor, then gets cancer and dies from it. I'm like, ugh. But when he's sitting there talking to Gord, that could be like when Gord is talking about his cancer diagnosis. That's when Joshua could easily have been like, I don't really want to tell most people this, but like, I'm kind of in the same, but like, you have these perfect opportunities to tell the story. I wouldn't even have shot this thing. Okay, so if I was going to shoot this thing, first off, you got to do all of Canada, baby. You got to go to the East Coast. I get it. They have the two guys from Newfoundland that are just like, yes, boy, $2, a box of beer is what the bet is, kind of thing. But I think more importantly, the way you can do this is you open with him picking up his motorcycle in St. John's or in Halifax, and you don't even know why he's doing the road tour. And then so he starts out on the road, and you can use flashbacks and you can use those conversations with people along the way as to why he's heading west. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or
and
then the voicemails of like come home and stuff. Almost like as David Mamet says in his book on directing, like, come in late, leave early, right? So he's checking his voicemails like, you got to come back to Toronto, and let the audience not know why did he run away from his fiance? Is he just trying to avoid the wedding? And then slowly put those layers in, and then you realize that he's trying to do like one last trip before he dies.
Right, but I think in terms of the narration, here's the thing I liked about it. Because the last shot of this movie is the narrator reading the book, right?
Well, of course you have to put that. It's a cool last shot because you had voiceover narration. Just remove the fucking narrator.
No. What I'm saying is
also that's not how I would have ended this film, but we'll get to that.
Okay, but the reason why I like that, because I think they did enough with I think his name's Campbell Scott.
Yeah.
Enough that it leaves it open to think it is the same character, maybe surviving the cancer and now reading his story.
Yeah, like the idea that it's like a true story, and like this is him just that you're almost kind of like meta, like you're watching the film version of his life and Joshua Jackson's actually playing him. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So sure, you're right. Like that, and I'm assuming that is what the director was kind of going for. I would have actually ended this film when he's in Tofino and he's like, paddling out on the surfboard, and he just paddles into the sunset. And I would have just gone black there.
And then it just sees Brody right there. He's like, fuck, the 15
yeah. No, it would be Keanu. It would have to be Johnny Utah because he's also Canadian, right? The surf is the source, bro. The surf is the source.
I was saying it would have been Brody paddling in, right? He made it, right? Like
he
did the wave.
Oh, yes. Yeah. But like I said, so one of the things I really did like about this film is the cinematography from across Canada. Like they're using those shots of him just like riding through the Rockies or through the prairies or Northern Ontario or whatever. That's the other thing. You got to have him go east first because you need to have him run through Quebec and have him speak English, and then they throw like tomatoes and stuff at him. Este plat tabernacle sacrement.
Because he was singing in French.
He was singing in French Canadian, yes.
But so like as a little sidebar too, like in terms of the sea stories, how come that lady's sea story was not, and she's never had a bigger orgasm than she did that night, right?
The key to life is a penis in your asshole.
And from then on, she always remembered his penis in the forest. It was like a red sequoia.
Every time she looked at her dog, she remembered while he was riding her, the dog was sniffing his bum.
Yeah, it was. They were doing it doggy style. So that's Emma Griner. She's actually like a Canadian musician. So her Joel Plaskett, who's from Nova Scotia, he plays the busker. Obviously Gordon Downey. Those are three big musicians that are in this film. I was actually shocked that there was no Tragically Hip in this film. Like
I mean like in terms of soundtrack?
Yeah. Like even if they did a cover right? Like somebody else did a cover. I think Bob Cajun, I know you're probably not super well versed with tragically hip. I'm not even compared to like real tragically hip fans, but I think Bob Cajun would have been like a great song, like left the house this foreman, 9:15. Like it's got a really kind of bluesy feel. And like could have been the Willie Nelson, could have been the wine. Like it's like such a Canadian Northern Ontario song. Like it would have fit anywhere in there. And especially even if you got someone like Emma covering that song in the film that Gord Downey is in, I think that would have been really cool.
So what you're saying is instead of singing the French song that you didn't understand, they should have just whipped out some
Yeah. Okay, listen. Okay, so just like there's a time period where every dude at the like party pulled out his guitar and did Wonderwall by Oasis. There is also a time period where someone would, well, it'd probably be like New Orleans is Sinking or something like that. But like, there's always that guy and a certain age like demographic that is like, oh, I'm going to do my best tragically hip. You know what I mean? So yes, you could absolutely do that. Actually would have been really cool too. They just like singing some tragically hip. And again, it would have been a really good nod for the fact that like 2 scenes before Gordon Downey's in there, right? So
yeah, but overall, did you enjoy it?
So the film is kind of boring, right? And actually, that's my quote. There's not a ton of quotes that I could find of this because it is a small Canadian film. But there was one from Variety, which is a little publication that does movie reviews sometimes. So Denise Harvey said that kind of aimless, pleasant, bland. Yeah, she could have also been describing Canada. Kind of pleasant, boring, bland. Again, I think that there's lots of opportunity in this film. I mean, the acting and stuff was fine. The dialogue was a bit weak. Like I said, I think the script needs another pass. Like I said, I didn't love the voiceover narration. I think that could have been done with dialogue. Even just the way, he obviously needs to like set things up. So for example, when Joshua Jackson, he's like, running because he's found out about his cancer diagnosis and he gets to the motorcycle, the guy is just like, bang, like right on him. Like, hey, so yeah, do you ride? Like, blah, blah, blah. Where it would have made way more sense for him to be like, oh, hey, nice bike, man. Yeah, I got to like, let him drive the conversation, right?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
And why did he discount the price? Like the guy didn't even get a chance to respond.
Because it's fucking Canadians, man. It's like that is 100% a Canadian thing to do. Like we barter ourselves down. Like my price is $8,000. Like, okay, I'll pay you $8,000. You know what? Fuck it. 7,500. All right. You don't have to. Fuck it. All right. 7.
No, I won't give you 7,500. I'll give you $8,000. Thank you. No, you won't. Please and thank you. You'll give me. Okay. And listen, if we were doing a spoof, 100%. And even with the stuff with Gordon Downey, like just let the characters settle. And like Gordon starts talking about like weed and cancer, like right away. It's like give a reason. Like they're like have them just like smoking that weed. And then, Joshua takes a toke or whatever. And it's like, I hope we don't get caught. And it's like, don't worry, man. They prescribe it for cancer. Or like, there's a better way to like lead into those lines instead of just being like, well, we need this to move the story along. So we're just going to say a bunch of dialogue, so.
Yeah. I won't lie. Like I did think like this was the very first time I've ever seen this movie.
It will also probably be the last time I see this movie, but so.
But was it your first time as well?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I didn't know, man.
Originally, when you sent it to me, I thought it was the Motorcycle Diaries, and I'm like, oh no, it's like it's the Canadian Motorcycle Diaries.
It is, but yeah, like because the whole thing is he's trying to find these grumps.
Yes.
I don't know what they are, but they also seem 100% fucking Canadian, where it's like a leprechaun, but instead of giving you money, they're just gonna pat you on the back and say good luck, right?
It's like the Sam Squanch.
But that when Downey came into the scene, I'm like, don't fucking tell me he's gonna be the grump, because that was the thing that I was thinking too. Like in terms of the dialogue, I'm like, why is the first thing he's fucking saying and talking about cancer right away? because I'm like, does he know? I'm like, is he
Again,
the grump?
yeah. So do you think that they were trying to do the whole like fate? This is fate. He keeps running into these people, like the motorcycle, and it's like it's just like fate is controlling his destiny. So obviously he is doing the right thing, going west. Like you said, like how did he know that I had to bring up cancer? Like who would normally do that?
Mm-hmm.
Also, why is he always outside? Even when he has a motherfucking hotel, motel, whatever, like he goes to the bar, he gets drunk, and somehow ends up like throwing up, not in front of the like bar, but like in the forest. He's clearly at the Fairmount
Banff?
in Banff, right? And he goes and gets lost in the forest, and then they sleep in the forest and have sex in the forest. I'm just like, okay, I get it. It's Canada. We throw up, have sex, all of that stuff. We actually do that in houses. Like we have houses and running water and everything else. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Oh, well, it was the same
and
thing.
he sleeps on the fucking beach in Tofino. You know how fucking cold that is? Like it is not exactly a super warm place.
Well, no, I've never been there. But even when he saw what is it, the Northern Lights, the
Yes.
Borealis, and then he's like sleeping on top of that big tree. But no tent, no nothing. He was very unprepared. But the one thing, like, I don't know when this movie was filmed.
And did he only have one change of clothes for that entire trip?
Yeah, like he slept in it too. The like he stank. But
It wasn't his feet that stank, it was his whole body.
Yeah, yeah. That is the thing. Like I don't know when this was filmed, but even when they're doing these motorcycle things, I'm like, this seems like it's like late October, early November, man. I'm like, this guy must be fucking freezing driving this motorcycle in these shots.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was not, the dog days of summer where it's like nice and warm. It's like cold. Yeah, it's probably there's no snow, so maybe late October.
Yeah, because
Or
some
either
of the
that or it's
trees
early. I
were
couldn't tell if if it was autumn or not. So it could also be like late May, right? Like early in the year.
maybe, yeah, I don't know. I know some of the trees did look like they were turning. They're starting to turn orange in some of the scenes. But the one thing, and it's not a criticism because this film's like old, but I kept on thinking like if they remade it today, but with like No Man Land kind of cinematography, like
Yes.
how fucking beautiful
And that is
would
actually
be.
that is the film that I actually thought about is like having, because like I said, having more sea story where you meet more people along the way. You can basically show Canada. Oh, because remember, like they shot this, there's like one person of color and one indigenous person in the whole thing. So you could actually, instead of just using like cameos of like Canadian musicians, you could have real people, sort of like they did in No Man's Land, right? Where you cast just like real people from, so and so Manitoba or PEI or whatever, and just have the character interact with like real people along the way to have a sense of like what it is to be Canadian.
Yeah, I 100% agree. But it was good. I do recommend it if you haven't watched it because it is to me a good movie. The thing that's kind of weird is on Rotten Tomatoes is it's 50% by the critics, but 73% by the audience. And there's
But
only been
go
8
ahead.
critics that have reviewed it, but over 2,500 audience people have reviewed it.
Yeah, and it's weird because the Globe and Mail, which is like a big Canadian paper, they said they didn't like it, but they didn't say why. They were just like rotten. It's like you couldn't even write like one line, one sentence to say why
Well,
you didn't like
to
this
me,
film.
because this movie is like, yeah, what 2008? It could have been right when Rotten Tomatoes was starting, and they didn't really know how it works.
Mm.
They're just like, okay, just bad or good. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought the acting was fine. It was great. Story wise, it was, you know, it it pulled.
Well,
It
like I
pulled
said,
at
I
some.
think I think it's a bit boring. I agree. So first off, you want to know like kind of what Canada's like, especially Canada's Sierra 2008? Watch this. We are a much more diverse country than this film shows. It isn't just a bunch of white people from sea to shiny sea. So yeah, definitely watch that. The cinematography, like the Canadian Road cinematography, is great. I mean, this could have been a government of Canada production, you know, like they've got Banff, they've got, you know, all the you know, largest dinosaur, largest hockey stick. So the largest hockey stick, by the way, is actually on Vancouver Island. It's in Duncan. And the beginning of the Trans Canada is not in Tofino; it's in Beacon Hill Park, which is also on Vancouver Island, but it's in Victoria. But I guess it makes more sense for like the end of his West Coast trip to end at the most western point of Canada, which is essentially Tofino, right? But that's not actually where the Trans Canada starts. Trans Canada, actually, mile zero, where Terry Fox actually started, is in Beacon Hill Park in Victoria.
Yeah, but they only showed where he finished, not where he started.
But there's a sign that says mile zero, and they actually make it look like it's in Tofino, but it's not.
Okay,
Like mile zero is actually
I must have missed that. Like I remember them at the end, right? Like where they show where, you know, he finished, where he was able to go, and then he.
Well, that's as far east as Terry Fox goes. That's where he's talking about, right? So,
yeah. Yeah. But that's the thing too. I know you're saying like this was government, but yeah, they did, you know, they're picking up, you know, Joshua Jackson. This time he would have been what? Just off of no, Dawson's Creek would have been finished by now. So this would have this would have been Fringe. He would have been on Fox's TV show Fringe at this time, right? Probably, you know, the whole 2 million of this production budget went to him. He was like, I don't want to fucking ride a motorcycle.
well, but he's one of the
Canada.
producers. He's one of the producers on this, so he was clearly like invested in doing this project. I do find it interesting though, because like when I was like quickly reviewing his filmography, I mean, Mighty Ducks, all of them, the Skulls, like in the late 90s, mid 90s to late 90s, like he was a really big actor, and I'm surprised that, you know, you look at what's his name from Fast and Furious that passed away,
Paul Walker.
Paul Walker. Like he was, I mean, he was in Dawson's Creek with Kate, Tom Cruise's ex. What's her last name?
Katie Holmes.
Katie Holmes. And like they all went on and kind of did some stuff, and like he's had a career the whole time. He's now on I think is it Paramount or Amazon's Fatal Attraction. But he never seemed to become like the big star that it seemed like he was poised to become. So I don't know what happened, or if he had some, you know, poor choices right after the Skulls and stuff like that. But he was like definitely in the mix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think like I don't have anything bad to say about his acting or anything like that. I think, especially with this movie, like there's all the little nods, right? Like even when he goes sees the Stanley Cup, right? It's when they found the Anaheim Ducks guy was.
Oh, I just realized that him. Yeah. Yes. Oh my God, that makes so much sense. He was in the Mighty Ducks, and he actually is like chatting with what's his name from the Ducks.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like I like all these little nods, right? That they did, but yeah, it could just be too. I know you're saying like not the star, but maybe he just, you know, wanted to be with his family more, right? So he takes these projects that don't keep him away that long. You know, sometimes that's a choice too.
That's possible. And like I said, like he's still very successful. He's doing tons of TV, so he's definitely got, you know, money coming in. And he's getting good reviews for Fatal Attraction. So our guest last week, Reese Evan Anson, was talking about how he did a bunch of films, and you know, he thought it was going to open up certain doors, and the doors he said it did open up were actually like, you know, writing on projects or working on other people. Like he worked on TV shows and stuff. And it seems like the writer director, so Michael McGowan, the writer and director of this film, I mean, he did like All My Puny Stories, which is fairly recent, My Dog Vincent, St. Ralph, Score, a hockey musical. But it looks like he's done tons of TV directing. Like right now he's working on I Woke Up a Vampire, but he's also done like Murdoch Mysteries, which is super popular here in Canada. So it's almost like these Canadian directors, unless they can, what are you making that weird face for?
Wondering what they're making in the background.
Oh, the reality is that like, it's almost like Canadian directors. It's either they make it really big like Villeneuve and go to Hollywood, or you do just enough film that people then give you jobs working on TV shows, and that allows you to actually work as a director. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But again, I think it's all how much of a hit that movie that puts you on the mainstream kind of does, right? Like Villeneuve was Prisoners, right?
Yes, I think so.
That's the one that put him on. It wasn't his first one, it was the second one, Prisoners, with Hugh Jackman, and I think that's the one that put him on the map.
Well, he has like Enemies, and he has a bunch of stuff that did really well at film festivals and stuff before that, right?
Mm-hmm. But no, what I mean, like in terms of the commercial stuff, right? Like in which he can go.
Well, what about the one
like,
with Jake Gyllenhaal?
Isn't that Prisoners?
Yeah, but you said Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, it's the same fucking movie. Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal.
I don't have his stuff in front of me, so I kind of threw me.
It's the same fucking movie. But I think that's when he can do it. And I think Arrival, right? Like Arrival.
Well, by that point, he was already like, I mean, it's Amy Adams. It's got a massive budget and everything else. He was already in the mix right now. I mean, we're working without our producer today, so I don't have the access to like information.
But what I think, like with Arrival, how much that was well written, how much that was well shot, and everything, and awesome twist ending too, in which he can then go be like, motherfucker, I want to make Blade Runner, right? And then that fucking beautiful to watch too. I don't think it was a commercial success, but it looked fucking beautiful, that he can be like, you know what, I'm now gonna fucking do Dune, right? And he can just name his shit, and they're like, all right, we're gonna pay you.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely become like a massive director, right? So once and I mean, he's been lucky that he hasn't really had a flop, because when you start playing around with those like big crazy budgets, like you get a flop and you can be fucked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he did Enemy, and then he did Sicario. So I would say that like Enemy did well, and then Sicario was like did such a fantastic job at like moving him into the Academy, and did well at the box office. And then he did Arrival, and then he did Blade Runner. And so he's just been successful, continuing to be successful. But here in Canada, he had Polytechnique and Incendies, and then he did Prisoners. So, but yeah, very few of our directors get to that level. I mean, I don't want this to turn into a Villeneuve podcast episode, but it's like, again, the more we talk to kind of our local people, it's like, yeah, you make movies and you kind of try and keep eking it out, and then hopefully you land a couple TV shows, episodes each year, which keeps. I think Mary Galloway was posting about how roughly you get about $60,000 to direct a broadcast episode of TV here in Canada. So, I mean, you do a couple of those a year, that keeps the money coming in, and then you get to make a feature film as well, right? So,
yeah, no, it is good, and that's why we're kind of doing this little series that you wanted to do with the Canada, to showcase more of the talent and the stories that are coming out of here, right?
We are Canadian. But yeah, I mean, check it out. It's a fun movie. I got my copy. I think I watched it on Amazon. It's part of my Prime subscription. So, I didn't have a whole lot invested, so I wasn't so concerned about any type of loss. It definitely wasn't one of those rent for $30 at home kind of things. And again, the soundtrack for this is very much like Canadian indie rock. It's like, Sam Roberts, Great Lakes Swimmers. Who else is on this thing? The Saltines. Obviously, Joel Pusquet, because he's in the movie, which again, I thought was odd that there was no Tragically Hip. So, I mean, definitely check out the soundtrack if you're into that kind of like Canadiana rock and roll. Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts.
And that is our wrap for the day. Please like and subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. If you want to get a hold of us, reach us at the www.howdyoulikethatmovie.com.
Do you have anything else you want to talk about with this film?
Not really. Like, yeah, I liked it. Like, what did you think? You think he survived or you think he died? Because they never resolved it, right? And that's the thing I liked about it. Like, it just left it open. Like, it's your interpretation.
I mean,
right?
to be honest, the fact that you like wrote a book and everything, I know they did say he could have up to a couple years. To me, it felt like they were pushing for the like that he survived.
Right, because once the whale came and he was like, I don't know what a grump was. Like what it's supposed to look like, but he feels like he found it, right? And it's like, oh, he was miraculously saved by.
Production by Rod Shaver, Vader Monkey Productions.